You're watching Next Pitch, the student athlete playbook for parents raising tomorrow's athletes.
Hi, Anthony Leverett here, host of the Next Pitch podcast. And on behalf of my producer and partner, Jason Cardona, I want to thank you all for listening and following us. We've certainly enjoyed bringing you the show and hope that you're getting value from this. If you do, just as a reminder, the best way to spread the message about a show like ours is to tell a friend, let your friends know to check us out and give us a like, give us a rating, and let us know you're listening. We'd greatly appreciate it. Today, we have a best-selling author on the program, Amit Chitre, the author of The Other Playbook, Brand Lessons Every Student Athlete Needs, is kind enough to join us and talk about why he wrote the book, what people can get out of the book. Really, really, really cool premise of taking some of the things he learned from corporate America around brand and building a brand for an organization and applying that to young student athletes. Really enjoyable conversation. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Amit, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. This is kind of a different take for us, and I'm super excited to have you on. Really appreciate you reaching out and coming on the show.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I will have introduced you properly before we start rolling here, but can you kind of, for our listeners, give us your background? How did you get to? We're going to talk about your book that you've written, and sort of this playbook for athletes and building their brand. But how did you get to where you are now?
It's been a long and winding. Actually started in local TV news. I got my degree in broadcast communications and started working as a reporter and anchor in small to mid-sized markets around the country. That was probably the first stage of my career. The second stage of my career was in public relations. So I worked at an agency and I did nonprofit communications at a national nonprofit. And then the third stage of my career was I left that to form my own communications consultancy. So for the last 9 or 10 years, I've been a communications coach and consultant. I work with individuals and corporations on helping them tell their story. And that can be anything from internal and external communications. How do you talk to your staff? How do you talk to media, customers? But the common thread in all of that is helping people tell their story. That's something that I've always been really interested in and passionate about. So
this transition from that to writing this book, what was it? Raising your own kids and seeing kind of the way the sports world had changed and shifted, or what was it that kind of drew you into this?
Yeah, so I've got 3 boys. They're all student athletes. I can tell you we are the stereotypical overschedule your kids in sports family. So, every weekend we have the spreadsheet of who's going to drop which kid off where. And that's how we got through the last, 15 or so years.
How old are your kids now?
So now they are 21, 18, and 15. I've got 2 in college and 1 still in high school.
And are your older kids playing in college?
Yeah. So one plays club volleyball in college, and he was a 3-sport athlete in high school. The other one played soccer all through high school for club soccer teams, and he plays soccer at a D2 college at Case Western in Cleveland. Cool. And my youngest is a high school sophomore, and he plays 2 varsity sports as a sophomore. So it's busy, man. I'll tell you. You know how it is.
You're in the thick of it. Yeah, I love it. It's my son's a football player, and he's a freshman football player, and they had their last game on Thursday, and I told my wife, I'm like, what are we going to do now? We don't have a football game to look forward to here for a few weeks. So it's fun. It's fun to watch them grow and develop. That's for sure.
Yeah. And on top of all that, I coached them throughout their childhood. Growing up, it was great coaching their basketball teams and soccer teams. And I was very heavily involved in the community sports scene. I helped run our town's travel program for many, many years. And so by watching my kids' experiences on their teams, their teammates, and kids I've coached, I just noticed this gap that a lot of kids that age, and it's not uncommon for teenagers, they just aren't aware of how their behavior drives perceptions about them. And they are unfortunately constantly being judged by by coaches, teammates, family members, potential employers, and they just didn't recognize that their behavior, good or bad, is driving perceptions about them. At the same time, I was working with my clients on the corporate side on this very issue. I've done a lot of trainings on brand development, personal brand development, crisis communications, and I saw how you communicate can significantly impact perceptions about you and outcomes of a particular situation. And it was interesting when those two worlds collided. I was about to give a training to a large company around personal brand development. And before the training, I just wanted to rehearse and run through it one more time before a live audience. So I told the boys, sit down. I need someone to bounce this off of and riff off of.
Tough audience, man. You're dealing with a tough audience there.
Well, it was a reluctant audience because they're like, Dad, we don't want to do this. Why do we have to do this? And said, well, just sit down on the couch. This is more for me than you. Yeah. But then the light bulb went on because as I was talking through it, I realized I'm not teaching professional skills. I'm teaching life skills. And these same lessons apply to my boy sitting on the couch. And why are we not teaching young boys and girls these life skills of how to build the best version of themselves? And so when it came time to sit down and write this book, the audience was crystal clear. We need a guide for student athletes to help them with these skills.
And this is not just for student athletes. As you're thinking about this book, and I'm hearing you speaking, what kids don't understand is this digital footprint is going to be with them for the rest of their lives, right? So who they are is the brand that they put out there. And it's not just about becoming a Division I athlete or a college athlete. Everywhere they go, what they're showing of who they are is going to be represented to those companies that may be hiring them someday.
Right. I mean, you know the numbers. A very small percentage of high school students go on to play college athletics, and an even smaller percentage of that number goes on to play professionally. But the skills you're learning during that time will stay with you for a lifetime. And so, you know, one of the things I talk about in the book is you're not just building the best version of yourself to win. It's building the best version of yourself to succeed in sports, in school, and life.
I love that. So the book is called, I want to make sure I get this right because it's a long title, The Other Playbook, Brand Lessons Every Student Athlete Needs, But No One Teaches.
There you go. That's right.
Okay. All right. You got it right there in front of me. Perfect. So let's dive in here. So first of all, we talked a little bit about this off the air, but you know, taking ideas from corporate America and putting them into sport, or from sport putting them into corporate America, they're the same thing. The world of sport is corporate America now. It is I think youth sports alone is a $30 billion industry. So you extrapolate that out to what's going on in all the other levels. There's a ton of money involved, and it has become very corporate. But as you kind of break down some of these key principles, the first one is how to see yourself as a product and as a brand. And I'm super interested in the product piece. So when you're talking to young athletes about them being a product, I understand the brand part, but help me understand what you mean by the being the product.
Yeah, it's a tough concept for people to get their heads around, especially when they hear it for the first time. Like, what do you mean I'm a product? I'm a person. I'm not a product. It sounds a little cynical, but I do like to make that point. Like, think of yourself as a can of Coke or a cell phone or a car. And think of it this way. These companies that push these products, they spend hundreds of millions of dollars to make sure you feel a certain way when you engage with that product. There's a reason why you feel a certain way when you step into a Starbucks. It's the smell, it's the lighting, it's the layout of the store, all of those things. Nothing is by accident. These companies are spending a lot of resources to ensure you feel a certain way when you engage with that product. Well, similarly, you, and especially student athletes, they need to think about who the customers are at this stage in their life and really be deliberate about how they want those people to feel when they engage with you. You can't leave it to chance. If you want to be perceived as a leader, what are the steps you're doing to help the people in your life see you as a leader? That's kind of the idea behind thinking of yourself as a product.
And so it's not just about what they're doing online, right? On Instagram and Snapchat and all of those places.
Right.
It's how they show up every single day within that realm that they live in, going to practice, walking through the classroom, going to the ice cream store, whatever it is that they're doing. You're talking about this on a macro level, not just on a micro level with what they do on their digital footprint.
Yeah, 100%. It's really interesting when I talk to students and even parents about personal branding. They come at me with, well, so this is what I need to do to get that NIL deal or to grow my Instagram following. And I back them up like it's much more important than that. When we talk about your brand, it's not about, selling yourself, so to speak. It's the values you stand for. It's being deliberate, taking the time, being intentional, just like these companies are intentional about what they want their products to stand for, being intentional about what you want to stand for, and then coming up with a plan to drive those values so others see it too.
So the next thing I read was you want young people to see their leaders, coaches, teachers, teammates as customers. Yeah. It's such a fascinating thought process. I've been through, obviously coached for a long time and now raised kids through this. And I've never thought of it this way, but when I start to think about it, it makes sense. So what is the idea behind, I want my math teacher or my football coach or my left tackle or my doubles partner to see them as customers?
Yeah. So everyone's making these judgments about you, whether you realize it or not. And you can, argue the merits of whether that's good or bad, but we just kind of live in a society where people form these snap judgments so quickly. And you can't go through life trying to please everybody. So you have to think about who are the people that are going to be important to you, who are the customers, so to speak, that those are the people whose opinions you really care about. And then how do you want them to feel about you, right? And you have to understand that different customers who may be important to you might view you in different ways. How you behave in front of your coach or how your coach perceives your behavior might be very different than how a teammate or the ref perceives your behavior. And all of those things could be important. And so it's kind of one of those, marketing adages, know your audience, know who you're speaking to. And it's a twist on that. And so, I talk to my boys, like you might think something you do is funny and your teammates might think it's funny or witty, but do you think your coach is going to like that? Or say there's a potential recruiter who sees that social media post. How do you think they're going to react to that? And then once you start to flip the switch and see all of those people as customers and understand that they're making judgments about you, suddenly it starts to crystallize like, okay, what do I want them to feel? How do I want them to perceive me? So that's the idea behind thinking of those audiences as customers.
I think it's fantastic. I talk to my son all the time to the point of ad nauseum where he probably is sick and tired of hearing this, but he's going to continue to hear it, is how do people feel in your classroom, in your school, in the locker room when they get done interacting with you at the end of the day? There's lots of talented kids out there. There's lots of people who have abilities, but it's that feeling that people get from you when they're around you, when they engage with you, when they play with you, when they teach you, that really matters of their perception of who you are.
Yeah, and you touched on something that's really important. There's lots of talent out there. So when you get to high school sports, these teams, everyone's good. And when you get to college sports, everyone's good. And so how are you differentiating yourself? What are the brand values that you can stand on? And I could think of so many stories. So my son who plays soccer in college, he played for a very competitive club team in the MLS Next division. And I remember they were playing at a showcase in Texas, and it was hot. I mean, it was high 90s, full afternoon sun. And he had a game where he played the entire game. It was late in the game, probably like the 70th minute. He just made a full run. He made a cross and he went down like a ton of bricks. His leg just cramped up. And being close to athletes, you know what it's like. If your leg goes into a cramp like that, it's extremely painful. So late in the game, tie game, 2-2 game, and the team had a man up advantage. They could have gone the other way and pressed. One of the players on the other team started making the run, saw him laying on the ground, turned around, went back, and immediately went down to stretch his leg. Now, this is in the middle of the game when, wins and losses matter. but he revealed a lot about his character and his integrity by helping someone on the other team who was in pain when play hadn't stopped. And so over the course of that weekend, I mean, maybe there were 4 days, there were countless games. We saw so many players, so many really good players. The player I remember the most is the one who did that. And so to you as a coach, what would you think about a player who did that, right? When everyone's good and someone does something like that, it speaks to his character. It speaks to his integrity.
Well, I think it's such an important conversation, right? And for kids who want to be college athletes, right, that we're talking to here, and parents who are raising kids who want to be college athletes. When you're a coach, and I can tell you this, I've done it, I did it thousands of times, and you sit and you watch a kid play, and they're a jerk on the court to their teammates, to the opponents, and they're talented. If there's a talented kid that isn't that way, I'm going to pick that other kid over and over and over again. And even if it might not be level, you just don't want that kind of person in your organization. And that translates to later on in life too. It's not just about being in sport. You don't want that person. You want the guy you're just talking about as part of your team, as part of your organization.
Yeah, and that's the gap that I don't think students often realize. I mean, students, they live in the moment a lot, and they don't necessarily understand how these small behaviors add up and that they can build perceptions about you. I call it the other playbook because we talk to them about what to do on the field or on the court. They have these playbooks to run this offense or do this on defense. And yeah, I think a lot of times, schools and parents may talk to them about values like, hey, do the right thing, or these are the values that our school represents, but there's nothing that really instructs the kids on how they can take ownership of that. And so, I really wrote this book as a playbook. It's a very simple read designed for students. It's, chapter by chapter, each chapter is a lesson, and they can write answers to questions at the end of each chapter. And so they go through understanding their brand, building their brand, identifying their customers. But as they go through and they get to the end, they will have built their own playbook with steps that they themselves can follow to build those brand values. It's those small everyday steps that we can take where over the course of time really make a big difference.
So everybody go get the book. That's first of all, we don't want to make sure that we say that. But as you're sitting here talking about this, and an expert having worked in all the things you've done on the corporate America side, and now just bringing this into sport, and I'm dealing with a young person, I'm a parent dealing with a young kid. What are those values that, as we're sitting down to, even before we think about our brand, although those values are going to translate to our brand as you've talked about, but what are those values that every kid should be thinking about because they matter to the people that are watching them?
So first, it should matter to them, right? Because not everyone's values are going to be the same. You and I may value completely different things. We hear so much about, building leaders through sports. Well, maybe not every kid wants to be a leader, or maybe a particular student's an introvert and they're not comfortable in that, overt leadership role. And that's okay. I think what we're asking the students to do is figure out, what is it that you want to stand for? And there are a couple of ways you can do that. One is, go with your strengths. Think about what you're good at. And those tend to be good pillars on things you can stand for. And then the other part of it could be aspirational, right? If we're going to take time and think about the person we want to be, maybe we're not there yet, but those are things that we can drive toward. And it's going to be different for every person. But I think that's one of the things that makes this really an interesting process, is thinking about the person that we want to be. Do we want to be known as a great teammate? Do we want to be known as a leader, a gym rat, someone who's spiritual, patriotic? I mean, there are literally hundreds of different values you can choose from or develop, but everyone has to go through that process themselves to figure out what it is that they want to stand for, what's the best version of themselves, and then come up with a process to build that person.
I love the idea of writing it down. I've talked about this on the show before, but I used to have my players write me a 5-page paper when they first got on campus, and it was their playbook for what they wanted for their future. And the idea that you want them to write down who they are, what their values, what's important to them, so that, number one, they can hold themselves accountable, but then involving the parent in this process. So you can say, you wrote this down. This is what you said you wanted. And maybe you're living up to all of them, but maybe not this one. And we're going to help hold you accountable to what you're telling me that you want, that you wrote down. I think that's the really important part of getting that down, that pen to paper.
100%. And I love the idea of including the parent because, I've got 3 boys. I've had them read the book. The older 2, they read it. They enjoyed it. We talked about it. The younger one, he's a high school sophomore. I had to drag him along a little bit. And so finally I said, okay, do this. Read the first chapter, then we'll talk about it. Read the second chapter, then we'll talk about it. But it was really an eye-opening experience because now I got to experience the book, not as an author, but as a parent. And we had some great discussions around, well, why do you value this more than that? Or you talked about this instead of that. Let's talk about that a little bit. And it really led to some great dinner table conversations, at a time and with a generation where everything is on the phone or everything is social media. Going through the book, putting pen to paper really opened up the door for us to have some great conversations and really learn about your kid in a different way and dig into why they value different things. It was a great experience.
Let's talk about the negative here for a minute, right? Like there's this, it's kind of intangible place that you can reach if you do this, right? And people are going to think of you differently and in a more positive way if you have this playbook to follow with your values. I think there's a tangible thing that can happen if you don't do it. The negative outcome of not living to values, not having a thought process about how you structure your life, how people view you, how you show up. What does that look like if you just trying to wing it or you don't go through and have an idea about what you're trying to get done?
I think the biggest risk is you leave it to chance. Your brand, your values, it's probably one of the most important commodities you have. So why would you leave it to chance to give others the opportunity to define who you are? If you don't follow a plan, others can pigeonhole you as, oh, this person is this or they're that. And that might not be what you intend, but you've taken no steps to help them think otherwise. And so giving other people the chance to define you, I think is a huge risk. I think the other risk is, and I've seen this in crisis communications with organizations, and I've seen it in crisis communications with individuals, and it certainly applies to athletes, is pressure doesn't necessarily break character, but pressure reveals character. And 100%. So when you see an athlete, we've seen it in the NFL where there's been like a spitting incident on the first game of the season this year with a player, or there are countless other examples. And the athlete says, well, that's not who I am. Maybe not. But if you had a plan to drive your values and you were sticking to that plan, then when you find yourself in a pressure situation, you're much more likely to stay with your plan and stay true to your values than not.
It's why it's so important to do this young. You just said a phrase that I've said over and over and over again. It's a slogan that I've said another probably 1,000 times in my life, is that hard times, pressure, difficult situations, they don't build character. They reveal character, but they do build character when you're young. Once you get to be 18, it's just who you are, right? It's really hard to change that stuff, and not impossible, but you kind of are who you are. Your habits are what they are by the time you get to certainly my age, old dude like me. So it's that young formative period of time where these conversations are critical to, this is what we stand for, this is what we won't stand for, this is who we are, happens at a young age, not once you get older and out in the middle of all those pressure situations.
Right. 100%. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I will push back a little bit on people can change. I mean, we've seen it time and time again, and in both directions. So in other words, if you have struggled to develop your personal brand, you find yourself on the wrong side, and then stop and say, you know what, this isn't who I want to be. I want to live more intentionally. You start making a plan and sticking to your plan. You can certainly change your brand. At the same time, and we talk about this in the book, how brands can change over time, both from bad to good and from good to bad. It can take 20 years to build a good brand and 20 seconds to destroy it. And so in the book, we talk about things that, what are the factors that can impact your brand? What can you control? How can you be aware of these things? How can you protect your brand? Because brands do change over time.
Yeah. So I'm a parent right now. And if I go get this book, what am I going to expect? And do you recommend I read it with my kid? Do you recommend the kid read it on their own? Or what am I going to get out of this? And how should we go through this process?
I 100% recommend you read it with the kid. Student athletes, they have to have some ownership. So yes, you can't read it to them. They have to be bought in. They have to read it. But the way I see this book being most effective is for students to go chapter by chapter. Each chapter is a lesson. Each chapter has some exercises. And so for parents to read it with their student athlete, both of you can read a chapter at a time, discuss the questions, move on to the next chapter. And what's great is that teams can do this as well. So for a coach, it's a great off-season activity. When you're not in season, you're looking for something to do to continue building culture, to keep your team engaged. You can assign this book, and before the next practice or meeting, talk about chapter 1 for 15, 20 minutes, and then talk about the next chapter at the next practice or meeting. It's just something that continues to keep the team engaged, and it helps the student realize that this coach is not just interested in my performance on the field, but interested in me and my growth as an individual.
As you were doing your research for all of this and putting this book together, what was the most interesting thing you found out that you might not have gone into the research component of it, that you got done right, and then you're like, that's something I didn't expect to find as I was going through this process?
I think one thing that struck me the most was the broad spectrum of how much coaches actually care about this. You will find some coaches, and this surprised me, that performance on the field, that's all I care about. Perform on the field, we want to win. And there were other coaches who really value culture and individual leadership and development, and will spend a lot of time and resources building up their team and players as individuals. I talked to a coach from USA Basketball who said, we have to interview the top high school athletes, top high school basketball players in the country, and get them on a roster of 12. Now, number 12 might be one of the best players in the country, but on this team may not play a minute. And I need to know that they're okay with that. And I need to know that they understand that they still have a role on this team, but that role might be something different than they expected. And so, a lot of coaches view this very differently. And I think as individuals who are looking for teams to play, you should be aware of how your coach feels about those types of things, because that might influence where and how you want to play. But again, for the player, I want to reiterate that this isn't just about where you're going to end up on your team or on the field, but these skills can really, really benefit you far beyond the sport. Which
is what youth sports is supposed to be, right? In my it's why we do this. So it's my podcast, so I can say this. People can disagree with me if we want, but it should be the safest place in all of life to learn the values and the lessons that you're talking about. And sport puts you in that pressure cooker of win, loss, good play, bad play, playing with teammates, all the things that come from sport. And winning should be a byproduct of all the good stuff that coaches are teaching that you're talking about in your book.
Yeah, 100%. And again, I mean, as a parent going through this myself with my own kids, it's been really, really gratifying to see them understand the lessons and, apply it to how they talk to the coach and, small things that they do in practice. I see it. And so it's nice to know, hey, they listen to the old man every now and then.
So can high schools reach out to you directly? Do you do seminars on this as well? Or is this just kind of a standalone book and it'll take you through everything? And if you do stuff, how do people find you and connect with you?
Yeah. So first of all, yes, I am working with high schools. I'm trying to get in front of colleges and work with them. You can find the book at the website, theotherplaybook.pro, P-R-O, theotherplaybook.pro. And then from there, you can order the book. You can contact me and reach out to me. But yeah, I would like, parents to order this book and talk about these lessons with their kids. for high schools, you can order it for teams and then contact me. We can supplement the book with in-person workshops or presentations, and the same for colleges as well.
Well, it's got to be pretty cool to hear your name mentioned with the #1 bestseller. We should have started with that. What's the title? Amazon
bestseller. Yeah, it's funny because I talked to the boys about all of these lessons, and you know how it is as a parent. They'll nod in agreement, they'll nod politely. Some things they'll take, some things they won't. They knew I was working on this book. When they finally saw it in print, I got a little bit of credit. I got, oh yeah, this is pretty cool. And then when it hit the Amazon bestseller and it got the Amazon seal, then I finally got, okay, yeah, this is pretty cool. So I've got some street cred with them a little bit. In fact, my oldest just texted me yesterday saying, hey, my friends think it's kind of cool that you're an Amazon bestseller. So I've got street cred now with the boys.
I think it's pretty cool too. I've oftentimes thought about writing a book, and I've started multiple times putting some stuff down on paper. It's just too frightening for me. I would need a therapist to probably get through the of doing it. But it is, I think it would be a fascinating process to go through.
It was a fun process. I really enjoyed it.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show. We've got a couple things left to do here before the end, but knowing everything, and I ask every guest the same question. So I think really, really important. You've gotten to a spot in your life where you've obviously been very successful in life, right? Like you've gotten all the things that you've done, raised kids. But if you could go back to your 13-year-old self, knowing everything that you've been through, the journey you've been on, and you could tap that 13-year-old kid on your shoulder, what advice would you give him to go through that journey a little bit differently?
Boy, I'm trying to place myself in the shoes of my 13-year-old self or 14-year-old self. And what I remember is those are really tough years. They're formative years. Early teens, you're under a lot of pressure from sports, the pressure to perform on the field, pressure to perform in the classroom, family responsibilities, social responsibilities. I would probably tell myself it's going to be okay, but don't be afraid to put in the work. You've got to put in the work, but if you put in the work, you're going to be okay. It's
amazing how many people, high-level people, I have said exactly the same thing, or at least something close to that. You're going to be okay. And it is really hard. And I think even harder now in today's world with everything that you are dealing with. And just knowing that you're going to be okay. If you could figure that out for yourself and not be just constantly worried that I'm not going to be okay, I think it's great advice for young people.
Well, you think about, all those pressures I listed. For teenagers today, that's magnified exponentially because of social media, right? Anything they do, good or bad, can get blasted out there and live forever. So the amount of pressure they're under, I can certainly appreciate that. But that's really why something like this is needed. It can give them, a step-by-step plan to get to where they want to go, to be the person that they want to be.
I should have asked this earlier. And this isn't typically how we do these interviews. I thought we were almost done, but I'm going to ask you one more
bonus question.
But this is bonus question. That's right. Final Jeopardy. So the social media component. What as you were going through this and you're researching and you're writing this book, how important is it for young people to understand it's a great medium to get their brand out there. It's also out there. So no matter what, it's out there, good or bad. How do you think about that, and how do you talk about that in the book of helping kids understand the importance of putting that positive value message out there instead of negative?
Yeah, I think the first thing that they need to understand is that social media is really just an extension of your brand. It's not like you can be one person in these face-to-face or personal interactions and then be someone completely different in social media. We see this in the corporate setting all the time with organizations or with celebrities, or someone will make a misstep on social media and say, well, that's not who I am. And you pause and you start to look at their body of work on social media and you realize, well, actually that kind of is who you are. And so Social media is really just an extension of your brand. And that's why it's so important to be grounded in knowing who you are and what you stand for. And if you are confident and secure in that, and you're taking steps to drive those brand values every day, then you could also use social media as a platform to also drive those brand values. So you're right, it can be good, it can be bad, but you have to understand that it's simply an extension of your existing brand values, and it is permanent. The kids need to understand what you put out there has a way of just living forever.
Yeah, I think that's a great spot to end. Okay. Most important part of the show. You got to tell me a dad joke. And if you don't have one, I've got one, but I think you've got one for me. I'm a huge dad joke guy, and this is my favorite part of every show.
So I love dad jokes. My family hates dad jokes because
Yes.
I tell them regularly,
Yeah.
but I really enjoy them. I'll tell you the one that probably got the most groans, and it was, we were eating dinner one day, and I said, "Hey, you guys heard of Murphy's Law?" And they're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Yeah, what if something can go wrong, it will. Whatever can go wrong will go wrong. Murphy's Law." They're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "You guys heard of Cole's Law?" And like, "No." I'm like, "Yeah, it's like shredded cabbage and carrots and mayonnaise, coleslaw right here." And we happen to be eating coleslaw, so they the eye rolls, and I got the groans, and yeah, that's one that will live in infamy.
Did you come up with that on your own, or did you read that somewhere? Because I've never heard that one.
I read it somewhere. I can't remember where, but I saved it. I saved it until we were eating coleslaw so I can maximize the impact of delivery.
Oh, I'm telling that one tonight for sure. We don't eat coleslaw, but it is coming out tonight. That's awesome.
Get a side of coleslaw.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Tell us again how people can find you.
theotherplaybook.pro, Pro. Thank you so much. This has been great.
It's my pleasure. Go get the book. Thank you for sharing this with us. I'm gonna get this and read this with my son, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Thank you.
All right, Anthony Leverett's back here. Just finished up my conversation with Amit Chitre about his book, The Other Playbook: Brand Lessons Every Student Athlete Needs. Really cool conversation, and I think it's obviously super relevant in this time where everybody's thinking about brand. Like, what's your brand? Who's watching? Who's listening? Who's paying attention? And I thought that multiple things that I find fascinating about this whole conversation about the business of sport and business kind of meeting. But the idea that you're a product, and I almost hate to think that about young people, but if you think about it the way that Amit talks about it, it's the idea that what your teachers, your coaches, your teammates, people around you experience, that's the product. That's who you are. And being able to show up all the time in a positive way to get them to want to buy your product. You are somebody that they want to be around. That is a really, really critical thing. Your leaders, your teammates are the customers, right? So those two ideas kind of put together, and making sure that you're putting out there what you want them to know about you, what you want to be perceived about you, so that the product that you're giving them is something that they want to buy, something that they want to be around. I thought it was a fascinating way to think about young people. And then something we both agreed on, talked about in a little bit different way, but is building these values young. It is possible to teach an old dog new tricks, but it is really, really a much easier process for young people to be able to identify. And it doesn't have to be a lot of values, but what is it that is important to you about how you live your life, how you show up? Get those written down, and then hold yourself accountable as a student athlete, and with your parents and your coaches, share with them what is important to you so they can help hold you accountable as you go on this journey of creating the brand, creating who you're going to be. And it isn't just about whether or not you're going to get an NIL deal someday to play in collegiately or play in the pros. This is about what you're going to be when you're out getting a job someday. all of those values, everything that you post, everything that you do follows you around, and figuring out how to get that more right and make less mistakes young is going to help you immensely along the way. Really enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate coming on the show. And like we talked about at the beginning, if you like what we're doing, share this with your friends. And until next time, I hope you have a great week.